July 23, 2008. Dawn breaks over the eastern horizon of the Zagros mountain range in northeastern Iraq. It's a day like any other. However, the murky and overcast skies are a sardonic and ominous sign of events to come this day. With the world's attention firmly affixed on the campaign in Syria, as well as the pending hunt for the nuclear terrorist faction, very little trepidation is expended with regards to the recent buildup of armed forces on the Iranian side of the Zagros. The consensus opinion is that the Revolutionary Guard is establishing a perimeter of intimidation along its western border in a vain and transparent attempt to provoke withdrawal of the considerable NATO resources dedicated to the conflict within the borders of that state which Iran considers to be its vassal. As such, not even the Iraqi military expends much effort marshaling for action. During the early morning hours, Iran acts to distract the world's attention. Under the cover of darkness, 3 separate and independent formations of tanks and motorized infantry units cross the Iraqi border and begin making their way through the remote passes and ravines that dissect the rugged terrain. It's not until approximately 0900 hours that the Iraqi National Defense Forces finally detect this dramatic maneuver. The invasion is not only devious, it's an utter surprise. From the outset, the Iranian plan of operation is quite obvious. Their intent is to threaten the oil-rich region of Kurdistan between the cities of Mosul and Kirkuk. Upon reaching the western foothills, the 2 northernmost formations of the advance will fan out across the plain and sweep aside any resistance between the Zagros mountain range and the Tigris River. The role of the southernmost formation is to blunt any northerly movement by those few NATO security forces still present in Iraq and stationed in the Baghdad region. With overcast skies this day, intervention by NATO air power is unlikely and therefore of no concern. As advance elements of the Iranian army make initial contact with Iraqi defense forces, a new war appears to be in the offing. Ironically, it is nearly 20 years to the day since the end of the last bloodbath waged between these 2 historic rivals. A Special Forces officer within the Iranian Military Command Bureau, the man hereafter referred to simply as Aziz, is a political attaché assigned to the center formation of the assault. Privy to both the military and ideological motivations behind the incursion into Iraq, Aziz's identity will therefore remain anonymous.
كانت المجموعة القتالية والتي كانت تعلق الأول.
The battle group, to which I was attached, was on the verge of exiting the western foothills and entering the North Plain when we made first contact with the Iraqi Defense Forces. Although this would mark my first actual combat experience, I was not terribly concerned, simply because our formation was accompanied by a full battalion of heavy tanks. The morale of the men was quite high. After all, we were engaging the hated Iraqis. For many of these soldiers, the devastating effects of the 1980s war still haunted their families. This prompted them to fight with great fervor. Recognizing that Iraq was momentarily vulnerable, the Revolutionary Council used this natural loathing of our neighbor in order to invest the cooperation of the military. Retribution for the nation's past complicity in Saddam's treachery was the impetus for invasion. However, I knew better. Our trespass onto Iraqi soil was strictly an act of self-preservation, born from the duplicity of state ideology.
According to Aziz, the Revolutionary Council in Iran cannot afford to lose Syria as a vassal state. Should the popular democratic uprising sparked by the NATO campaign topple the Damascus regime, such an event might inspire a similar movement in Iran. Furthermore, the fundamentalist faction inside Syria is on the verge of falling into the hands of the Western powers. If captured, their trail might lead back to Tehran, thereby implicating the Salukba regime in the nuclear conspiracy as the intermediary whom acquired the processed uranium used in the dirty bombs. In occupying the Iraqi oil fields of the north, the leadership surmises that the world will be forced to react immediately with those military assets already in the region, thereby relieving pressure on Syria and providing the terrorists with an opportunity to escape. The Council is also cognizant of the fact that the UN will eventually intercede to broker a peace, but not until long after their underlying agenda has been fully realized. In a facetious gesture intended to add insult to injury, Tehran brands their premeditated act of war Operation Thunderbust. The initial encounters between the unprepared Iraqi border units and that of the Iranian assault formations are both brief and completely one-sided. By mid-afternoon of the 23rd, the general advance reaches the fringes of the North Plain Desert and pauses to regroup. With only the fledgling Iraqi military and a token force of NATO security units present within the country, it appears as though nothing can stop the Iranians from overrunning the vital Kurdish oil basin. Stationed near the city of Tikrit on adjunct security duty is Captain Travis Ricks, commanding Company A of the 4th Marine Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion. Upon receiving news of the provocative Iranian incursion, they proceed to mobilize for action. Their mission? Head north and east into the teeth of the advance, make contact with the lead elements, and determine their intentions.
At the time of the attack, Company A was part of a small U.S. ground contingent in the vicinity of Kurdistan. We had been detached from the Syrian campaign in order to assist special forces in the pending hunt for the terrorists in Al Jazeera. Until then, we were conducting typical security operations in and around Tikrit, a zone that had seen more than its fair share of insurgency. When we got the call to activate, I was dumbfounded. We were being tasked to meet a general enemy assault in northern Iraq, rather than our planned mission into northeast Syria. Being that the Iraqi army was already maneuvering into position along all the primary roadways leading into the vast oil reservation, our function was to reconnoiter the less traveled, more obscure avenues of approach within the expansive North Plain. To accomplish this mission, I was compelled to split my 3 scout platoons into separate elements with 3 distinct destinations. In addition, each platoon was supported by at least 1 mobile anti-tank platform. For command purposes, I personally led 2nd Platoon at the center of the excursion, while my executive officers each took control of the other 2 detachments.
While the bulk of the NATO security forces in the south moved to establish a defensive perimeter along the Baghdad Triad, it's the duty of the handful of Marine air and ground units in the north to meet the Iranian onslaught. The destination of Ricks and 2nd Platoon is a tiny medieval-era village designated Objective Keystone, a label that will soon prove to be quite prophetic for an otherwise insignificant crossroads wedged in time between antiquity and triviality. The date, July 24th, 2008. The place, an obscure and remote commerce way station nestled on the border between 2 provinces of ancient Mesopotamia. flanked by the sand dunes of the North Desert and the Wadi Akaret. Its name is Albeit. 6 weeks into Operation Imminent Thunder, NATO and Iraqi forces have encountered an anomaly of military activity well outside the Syrian campaign theater along the Iran-Iraq border. Its intent, deliberate. Its implications, global. Having been rebuffed politically, the Salukba regime has used the distraction of the Syrian nuclear terrorism crisis to impose their radical will upon the region. In an effort to respond to this threat with the limited resources at its disposal in country, Combat Command has issued orders for the defense of Baghdad, while simultaneously tasking the meager assets stationed further north near Kurdistan to assist the Iraqi army in the North Plain invasion zone. In this case, elements of the 1st Marine Division, of which Company A of the 4th Recon Battalion is a part. Forced to divide his lone company into 3 independent sections in order to single-handedly reconnoiter the vast plain on the axis of the Iranian advance, Captain Ricks and 2nd Platoon exit the main road net and proceed towards their objective via a gravel-topped road designated 1080G. Should the Iranians select this secluded rural route as one of their avenues of approach, this tiny U.S. force may very well be all that stands between the invaders and the city of Kirkuk.
We approached the objective cautiously. There was no sign of an Iranian advance guard. Despite Albeit being quite remote, it was not without some strategic value. A long-running depression, called the Wadi Akaret, straddled the village to the south, while the fringes of the North Desert sands encroached upon the roads leading in and out of the area. These terrain features, combined with a protruding central ridge, referred to by the locals as the Sultan's Dagger, created something of a land conveyance bottleneck at this particular location. Since my combat force consisted of only 18 scout troops, I determined to head directly for Albeit and set up shop within the confines of this tiny commerce station. Other than our collection of small arms, our only real defense was that of the 7 infantry fighting vehicles transporting us to the objective. That being the case, we could only hope to be the first combatants to arrive on site.
The LAV-25 is a 14-ton armored infantry transport and fire support vehicle used exclusively in the U.S. Armed Forces by the Marine Corps. It's a highly versatile 8-wheel drive platform that is not only very quick and maneuverable on virtually any terrain type, it's also buoyant in nature with twin propeller drive shafts for amphibious matriculation. Due to its limited troop capacity and relatively thin armor plating, the LAV is predominantly utilized by reconnaissance units. All 3 versions of the LAV are at Captain Rick's disposal, including 2 examples of the lethal anti-tank platform with its twin-tow missile launcher. As for the Iranian invaders, the secluded 1080G passage has indeed been selected as an avenue of advance, simply because it resides along a path eschew that of the primary transportation corridors, where direct combat could potentially hinder Tehran's delicate operational timetable. Aziz and his team have been tasked with overseeing the progress of a mixed detachment of regular army and reservist units that will attempt to skirt the main battle zones and drive onto Kirkuk by way of Albeit. Although this force is currently divided and still several kilometers distant, their overall plan of action includes one crucial element of surprise: subterfuge. Just after dark, an armed band of Iranian operatives, local malcontents, and foreign radicals descend upon Albeit as a precursor to the force's imminent arrival. Their mission is to secure the village and disrupt all communications in and out. Unbeknownst to Captain Ricks and the men of 2nd Platoon, they are not the first armed combatants to arrive on the scene. The time is 0250 hours. The Battle of Albeit is about to be joined. You're watching Tales of Virtual Combat on His Story International.